Hello everyone, I am the Ace of Shame. You may be surprised to see this, as this is not your normal filterless content. But seeing as this ties in with our newest episode that's not quite out yet, I wanted to go ahead and make this, since we didn't quite have enough time to fully read out any really good urban legends on the show. Of course, you can't do it in a brightly lit place like this, so you're going to have to follow me. That's much better. What do we think of this? I think this is good. Perfect place to tell a scary story. Alright. So get your blankets, get comfortable. If you're driving your car, stay awake. This should help. Today, I'm going to be reading you the story of Shh, the trees are sleeping. I recently moved because of work. It wasn't an easy decision because I had to leave all my family and friends behind. But it was a great way for me to make my own life. My family are great, but I felt like I was being coddled too much. My friends were people I knew from high school, which when hanging out always devolved into immaturity whenever I was with them. Honestly, I just wanted to grow up. Plus, my work took me to rural parts of England. Luckily, I was given a hefty bonus, plus some funding from my parents, which gave me enough for buying my own place, and I eventually settled on a house that was almost too big for one person, and also had a nice garden with a unique white tree in the center, which I adored. I mainly chose this house as behind the property were many trails that I could explore, a hobby which I could never do in the city, but always fancied and could now binge with easy access. My parents also let me bring my childhood dog, Jackson, as I was brought up with him for as long as I can remember, even though I was trying to leave my old life behind. It's good to remember your roots. Plus, he provided me with much-needed company while I tried to get used to this new life. The deal I had for my house was pretty good. It's how I managed to get one much too big for my needs. I could either pay the large deposit, which was too much for me, or I could leave a more affordable deposit under the condition that if I left within the month, they kept the house and my deposit. I had no plans on leaving, as my job was pretty secured, so it was a good deal to me. While being shown around, I asked about the previous owner, a good idea to do so when buying unoccupied properties. The estate agent told me that the previous owner had left suddenly, which is why they implemented the policy I was signing up for. They also mentioned that the old owner had a cat, and there was a reward if it was returned. It was implied that the cat would just return to the garden on its own, or I could try to look for it when I was out on the trails. A positive about the neighborhood is that it was almost all old retired people living out their golden years in a nice rural scenic area. This was an amazing contrast from the hustle and noise of the city, something I wasn't too fond of. I settled into work pretty fast, and it wasn't long until I was one of the many happy travelers walking along the trails with my dog, passing other cheery dog owners, enjoying the scenery. People here were friendly too, often stopping by to say hello and let their dogs socialize. During one of my many hikes, after venturing down the path for a while, I made my way to the entrance to the park. I usually started from behind my house, so I had never started from this entrance. I noticed this sign with a few rules telling hikers to stay on the designated routes, look out for suspicious behavior, don't litter, don't be out at night. The usual rules you find in these kind of trails. After about a week, I let my dog out one night to do his business. After calling him back, he didn't return. I looked out and saw no way he could escape, so I presumed he'd just decided he was going to sleep outside. The weather was nice, and it's something he liked to do from time to time. It was an odd thing for sure, but normal for Jackson. He was an odd dog. Sadly, the day after, I called out for him, and he still didn't return. I walked around the garden to see if there were any holes in the fence that he could have squeezed through, but I saw no way for us to escape. Perplexed, I took to the trails after work for a few hours, to no avail. Fortunately, I had the next few days off from work due to a shipment error, so I decided to spend this time productively. I packed a large rucksack with food, some survival gear, and a compass. My plan was to travel through the day and possibly into the night to see if I could find Jackson. I started on the main trails Jackson and I usually walked, occasionally asking passersby if they had seen my dog. Nothing. I made my way to some of the routes I hadn't yet explored, just in case Jackson got excited over the idea of new territory. Again, nothing. It was apparent I'd be using the plethora of supplies I packed, because the only areas that were left to search were off the trail. My search eventually became quite a fun adventure. There was a lot of flora that wasn't on any of the main trails, which looked amazing. I also saw hints of wildlife. Getting into the evening, I found myself at the entrance of the grove of white trees, similar to the one in my garden. I wandered in, getting closer to look at these bizarre trees. The bark was pale and felt rubbery, had an almost translucent look to it. A very unique texture to me, but I'm no expert on trees. Once in the middle of this unusual area, I felt it was a perfect time to settle down and eat my dinner. I packed some simple sandwiches and ate them while I watched the sun set behind the trees. The way the dimming orange glow bounced off the white leaves looked astonishing. I made my meal time worth the travel. Just before the sunset, I heard a rustle behind me. I turned to see a deer stalking around the area. I quietly packed my lunchbox and pulled out my phone to see if I could sneak a photo. The deer looked picturesque in the dim glow of the sun and the pale trees surrounding it. Just as I was about to take the picture, the sun set and the area was plunged into darkness. A wind blew up as I heard the trees shaking. The deer's ears perked up. Startled, it ran away. The wind stopped, but strangely the rustling didn't. I turned, and I saw the branches of the tree were starting to swing wildly. As I was trying to comprehend this strange sight, a branch swooped down and punctured straight into my bag. Before I knew what had happened, I was lifted into the air at a terrifying speed. I reacted by undoing the buckle to my bag, and I was dropped to the ground. I looked up to see all the branches acting in this strange behavior. They were twitching in an uncanny way. Definitely not the influence of any kind of wind or weather. This was purely the movement of the trees themselves. Out of instinct, I started running as fast as I could. I turned on the light on my phone to help guide me. To my right, I heard a wailing of a dying animal. I turned to see the deer I was watching just moments ago, being forced into the trunk of the tree. Through the top, its branches impaling and pushing the struggling deer as it was forced into the tree's maw. This prompted me to run even faster, fast as I could, ignoring the dangers. Tripping, I ducked and weaved around the branches that were swinging wildly, getting scraped and smacked a few times. I wiped the water building up in my eyes, only to see I was about to run face first into a branch. I skidded to a halt and closed my eyes, expecting to be scooped up, ending up like the deer I'd witnessed so many moments ago. After a moment, I opened my eyes and saw the tree was still. It was just a normal oak tree. I turned my back to see I was out of the surreal area with white trees. As I was watching from a distance, I saw a fox taking a similar route as me, out of the danger zone. I saw it almost escape, but just as it was about to hit a safe distance, it was taken by surprise. A wild swing, and pulled back. The fox screaming a deafening wail of defeat as it was crunched and devoured by one of the trees. Seeing that, I accepted how lucky I was to escape with only a few cuts and bruises. I eventually made my way to the edge of the woods, saw my garden fence. I was so relieved that I even bothered to open the gate. I simply slumped myself over and rolled onto my back in relief. As I lay there and closed my eyes and tried to comprehend all I had witnessed, none of which made any sense to me. While I was in this state of thought, I heard a strange sound, similar to the cracking of an old floorboard or the opening of a stiff door. I opened my eyes to see the tree in my garden starting to jerk and twist to life, seemingly picking up that I was within its reach. I bolted upright and made a dash for my back door, fumbling for my keys as the tree began sweeping its branches across me. Starting with where I was lying down, I saw it picked up on my trail, moving its sharp branch point first along that same route I had ran. Lucky I had managed to open the door and get inside, the branches scraping along the closing door. I made my way to my bed, taking one last look out the window at the tree, which was slowly juddering back to its original shape. I lay down struggling to sleep, but eventually the exhaustion won and took over. The next day, I woke up and looked out the window. The tree was motionless. I slowly made my way to the garden and grabbed my washing pole. I had been in the garden many times and picked up that movements in the forest only started after the sun had set. I slowly prodded the tree to see if it would react. Nothing. Nothing happened, which confirmed my belief. I searched my shed, finding an array of abandoned tools on the wall. Slightly rusted hatchet. With malice, I grabbed it, firmly and sternly, and made my way to the abomination. My eyes watered slightly as I started hacking away at the trunk. The hatchet was blunt, so it took some time, chopping and swinging, but adrenaline was fueling each swing. About a quarter of the way through, a strange liquid started to coat the axe. I let it seep out and saw it was steaming slightly. Not wanting to stop, but not wanting to get any on me, I put on some gardening gloves and goggles and carried on. The deeper I got, the more this strange fluid started leaking from the pale bark and the deep amber. Eventually, I made it far enough to push the tree over and let its own weight snap the rest of the trunk. It seemed that my nightmare wasn't over yet. In the center was the remains of a carcass of flesh that was almost all dissolved, making it unrecognizable. But one thing stood out to me, the dog collar that still faintly read, Jackson. Out of respect, I gently pulled it out. Underneath was the dissolving remains of another animal, vaguely reminiscent to that of a cat. It wasn't hard to figure out who it belonged to. After I knelt down to look through the fallen tree, I saw it was hollow with rows of small needle-like teeth. I cringed at the thought of how painful it would be to be forced down the shaft against your will into the disgusting acid below. From how shallow the teeth are, I can't imagine there's a chance you could hit the bottom without dying straight away. A fate I imagine is worse than death. I used the hatchet to make a makeshift hole to bury Jackson. I left the collar on top as a memorial. After this whole ordeal, I made my way back to my living room, dirty and in shock. I lay down, eyes open, just contemplating all I had witnessed and what I should do. It was a lot to take in. I was woken from my trance when I heard a key rattling at my front door and mumblings from outside. Perplexed, I sat up, watching as 3 people entered my house, talking jovially. It was the estate agent from before, showing around a young couple, just at the end of explaining how the previous tenant left without notice. I gave an exaggerated cough and saw the blood drain from her face. She quickly dismissed the couple to have an impromptu meeting with me. She knew they were busted, but gave me an interesting deal. She offered to pay me a rather large figure to never tell anyone about this scheme. I know it was wrong to accept, but I found it was my best option. In my opinion, there was no easy way I could blow the whistle on this thing. It's one of the most unbelievable things I can imagine. I didn't let this on during the negotiations, and I walked out with enough money for me to be set for a long number of years. As promised, I've not investigated anything since, nor have I warned any others from moving in there. But that's why I'm telling that to you now, as, in a way, it makes a rather nice horror story, don't you think? So yeah, that was The Trees Are Sleeping. I thank you so guys so much, but I guess we should probably end the video where we started it, huh? Be a bit silly to end it here in the forest. That's not good. Well, I guess this is the end for me. Goodbye, everyone.